What does it feel like to be erased? Not just from a job, but from a legacy you've poured 15 years into, a company your father built from a single office in Chicago's South Loop? I was about to find out. The quarterly sales data flickered on my screen, numbers I'd wrestled into shape through late nights and quiet compromises, when the door to my office swung open with a force that rattled the frame. Martin Ree, my boss, stood there, his silhouette filling the doorway, a file clutched in his hand like a weapon. No knock, no courtesy, just a deliberate entrance meant to unsettle. I looked up, steadying my breath, and met his eyes. Something told me this wasn't about the numbers. "Bennett!" he barked, tossing the file onto my desk with a thud that scattered my neatly arranged pens. "We need to talk, now." His voice carried that familiar edge, the one he used to command boardrooms or silence dissent. Martin was the kind of man who thrived on power, who liked reminding everyone he held it. I'd worked under him for 4 years, navigating his ego with the precision of a tightrope walker. I glanced at the folder, its contents hidden, then back at him. "Of course," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. He didn't sit. Instead, he loomed, his shadow stretching across my desk like a storm cloud. "The board's decided to restructure the leadership team," he said, his tone clipped, rehearsed. "We're moving in a new direction, and we need people who can lead, not just crunch numbers." I blinked, the words sinking in slowly, like a blade through fabric. "You're firing me?" I asked, my voice calm despite the sudden tightness in my chest. He smirked, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his face, as if he'd just landed a winning shot. "Let's not be dramatic, Arya. We're releasing you from your position, effective immediately." No warning, no performance review, no acknowledgement that my department had just delivered a 12% revenue spike, the highest in 3 years. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands to keep them steady. "May I ask why?" His eyes narrowed, as if my composure irritated him. "You lack vision," he said, the words dripping with condescension. "You manage tasks, not people, and let's be honest, this industry demands strong leadership, assertiveness, and confidence, traits you haven't exactly shown." There it was, not even subtle, a jab at my gender, wrapped in corporate jargon. He didn't see me as a leader, not because I hadn't delivered, but because I didn't strut or shout like he did. I nodded slowly, letting his words hang in the air. "I understand," I said, my voice neutral, unshaken. Martin's brow furrowed, clearly expecting tears or outrage. "I'll need your badge and company laptop by the end of the day," he added, regaining his stride. "Access will be disabled by 5 p.m. HR has your severance details." I stood, extending my hand. "Thank you, Martin. I appreciate the clarity." He hesitated, then shook it, his grip firm, dismissive. "Good luck out there," he said, turning on his heel and striding out, satisfied with his little victory. I sat back down, exhaling slowly. My hands didn't tremble, my heart didn't race. Instead, a strange lightness settled over me. I glanced at the framed photo on my desk, my father, smiling at the ribbon cutting for the company's first office, his dream realized. I ran my fingers along the frame's edge. "You told me to wait, Dad," I whispered, "until the time was right." I packed a few items, a mug from my team, a notebook of ideas Martin had ignored, and left the office. Co-workers' sympathetic glances followed me, but I offered only a polite smile. As I stepped into the Chicago sunlight, the weight of 15 years slipped off my shoulders. I pulled out my phone and texted my lawyer, "It's time. Prepare everything." Martin thought he'd ended my story. He had no idea I was about to rewrite his. 2 weeks before Martin's smug dismissal, I sat in a quiet office, 5 miles from Chicago's glittering skyline, staring at an envelope that held my future. My father's handwriting adorned the front. "Arya, open on your 35th birthday," a command laced with his love for theatrics. The air felt heavy, expectant, as if the room itself knew what was coming. Mr. Harrington, our family lawyer, watched me with a fatherly warmth, his eyes hinting at secrets he couldn't yet share. I traced the envelope's edge, my heart stirring with a mix of curiosity and reverence. Whatever lay inside, it was my father's final gift, and I was ready to receive it. The clock struck noon, and my 35th birthday officially began. I slit the envelope with care, revealing a handwritten letter and a formal document with embossed seals. I unfolded the letter first, my father's neat script pulling me into his voice. "Arya," it began, "if you're reading this, you're 35, and you're ready. I never doubted it, not for a second. You've worked twice as hard for half the recognition, and I saw it all. The sacrifices, the integrity no one noticed." My throat tightened as I read on. He wrote of the company he'd founded, how it had changed after his death 5 years ago, growing colder, more ruthless. "I knew a time might come when you'd need more than a seat at the table," he continued. "So I gave you the table." I paused, my hands trembling slightly, and turned to the document. It was a trust agreement, notarized and airtight, stating that 90% of the company's shares, my father's stake when he stepped down, had been placed in my name, held until this day. Full voting rights were activated immediately. I read it twice, then once more, the numbers searing into my mind. 90%. I wasn't just a shareholder. I was the majority owner, the controlling force of the company that had just cast me aside. A buzz of disbelief coursed through me, not just at the power but at my father's foresight. He'd known I'd face men like Martin, men who'd underestimate me, and he'd armed me for this moment. "Is this real?" I asked Mr. Harrington, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, his smile soft but certain. "It's real, Arya. Your father structured the trust to avoid public filings. The board has no idea unless you choose to tell them." I leaned back, the weight of his words settling in. "Why wait until now?" I asked. Harrington's eyes met mine. "He wanted you to experience the company first, to see who would reveal themselves, to decide if you wanted it before you claimed it." The words hit like a revelation. My years of being overlooked, of watching Martin take credit for my ideas, of smiling through subtle slights, they weren't wasted. They were my father's test, and I'd passed. I folded the letter carefully, tucking it into my purse. "Let's talk about what comes next," I said, my voice steadier now. Harrington raised an eyebrow. "You're not rushing in?" I shook my head, a plan forming. "Not yet. I need the right moment." That night, alone in my apartment, I reread the letter under the soft glow of a lamp. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching the Chicago skyline in the distance. My father had believed in me, not just as his daughter, but as his successor. The company wasn't just his legacy, it was mine to reclaim. I closed my eyes, feeling the quiet power he'd entrusted to me, and knew I'd wait for Martin to overplay his hand. He thought he controlled the game, but I held the board. The next day I called Harrington again. "Prepare the documents for a shareholder meeting," I said, "but don't notify the board yet." There was a pause. "What are you planning, Arya?" he asked. I looked out at the city, its towers glinting like a promise. "I'm planning to walk into that boardroom," I said calmly, "and show them exactly who they tried to erase." The line went quiet, but I could sense his approval. The pieces were in place, and I was ready to play my part, not with Martin's bluster, but with my father's vision, sharp and undeniable. The days after my firing were a study in silence, but not the kind that signals defeat. It was the quiet of a chess player plotting 5 moves ahead, each step deliberate, each piece positioned with care. Chicago's loop buzzed around me as I sat in a corner booth of a discreet cafe, the clink of coffee cups fading into the background. Across from me, Mr. Harrington slid a draft of the shareholder meeting request across the table, its pages crisp with possibility. My phone buzzed with HR's insistent calls about an exit interview, but I ignored them. Martin thought he'd written my ending. I was busy crafting his. The document was simple, a formal notice to call a special shareholder meeting with one agenda item, leadership review. Harrington, leadership review and appointment of new executive management. It was a legal grenade, and I held the pin. "You're sure you're ready?" Harrington asked, adjusting his glasses. "Once you submit this, there's no going back." I met his gaze, my voice steady. They pulled the pin when they fired me. He nodded, a flicker of respect in his eyes. We set the timeline. Notice served Friday, meeting on Tuesday, giving the board 2 days to scramble. Perfect. Next, I met Caroline Winters, the trustee who'd guarded my father's shares since his passing. Her office, tucked in a quiet Chicago suburb, was a shrine to precision. Files neatly stacked, not a paper out of place. "I've watched Martin dismantle your father's legacy," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. Inside were the numbers I needed. Employee satisfaction down 38%, turnover up 47%, $2 million in unauthorized executive perks, and flat revenue despite a booming market. Martin's leadership was a house of cards, propped up by inflated projections. "If this continues," Caroline said flatly, "he'll tank the company in 2 years." I nodded, absorbing every detail. The truth would be my weapon, sharp and indisputable. Back in my apartment, I pored over the data, cross-referencing employee surveys with financial audits. Martin's signature was on every misstep: lavish trips, bonuses for loyalists, reports that glossed over cracks in the foundation. My father had built this company on people, not numbers, and Martin had betrayed that. I jotted notes, my handwriting as deliberate as my plan. The board would see the evidence, and Martin would have nowhere to hide. My phone pinged with texts from former colleagues. "What happened? Did you quit?" "Martin's acting like nothing's wrong." I didn't reply. Let him bask in his false security. Let him underestimate me one last time. That evening, I stood before my mirror, slipping into a navy suit I'd bought for a promotion that never came. It fit perfectly, tailored to command a room. I practiced my opening lines, not a speech, but a scalpel. Precise, measured, undeniable. "I'm not here as an employee," I rehearsed, my reflection steady. "I'm here as the majority shareholder." The words felt like armor, forged by my father's trust. I imagined Martin's face, his confidence crumbling, and allowed myself a small smile. The city sparkled beyond my window, Lake Michigan a dark mirror to my resolve. By Monday, the office was abuzz with rumors. "Arya's gone. Did she screw up?" Martin, I heard, was louder than ever, parading his authority like a peacock. Good. The higher he climbed, the harder he'd fall. I met Harrington again, finalizing the documents. "They'll be served tomorrow," he said. "By Tuesday, you'll be in that boardroom." I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. Caroline's folder sat on my table, a testament to Martin's failures. I added my touch, a timeline of my contributions, ideas he'd dismissed, successes he'd claimed. The board would see who'd truly driven the company forward. As I lay in bed, the city's hum a distant lullaby, I thought of my father. He'd known this day would come, had prepared me for it with every lesson, every quiet nod of pride. The whiteboard in the engineering bullpen flashed in my mind, a phrase I hadn't yet seen but would soon inspire. She came back. I closed my eyes, not with anger or fear, but with certainty. Martin had swung first, but I'd deliver the final blow, not with his noise, but with my truth, honed and ready. The Chicago skyline glittered through the boardroom's floor-to-ceiling windows, a silent witness to the storm about to break. I stood by the elevators, smoothing the navy suit that felt like a second skin, my father's trust documents tucked under my arm like a shield. Tuesday morning had arrived, crisp and cool, and the 50th floor boardroom hummed with unsuspecting voices. Martin's confident drawl carried through the frosted glass, oblivious to the reckoning I'd prepared over sleepless nights. Mr. Harrington met me with a nod, his expression calm but electric. "They're in there," he whispered. I took a slow breath, my heart steady. This wasn't just a meeting, it was the moment I'd claim what was mine. The boardroom door opened with a soft click, and heads turned. Martin, mid-sentence about quarterly projections, froze, his eyes narrowing as I stepped inside. "Arya," he said, his voice sharp with disbelief. "This is a board meeting. Employees aren't permitted." I smiled politely, setting the ownership documents on the polished oak table. "Exactly," I replied, taking the head chair with deliberate ease. The silence was absolute, a vacuum of shock. Board members exchanged glances, some stiffening, others leaning forward. Mr. Dalton, a silver-haired veteran from my father's era, adjusted his glasses, sensing the shift. "I'm not here as an employee," I continued, my voice clear, unshaken. "I'm here as the majority shareholder." The words landed like a thunderclap. Martin's jaw tightened, confusion giving way to scorn. "You can't be serious," he scoffed, but I held his gaze unflinching. It's quite serious, I said, nodding to Harrington, who handed a copy of the ownership certificate to the board secretary. As of my 35th birthday, 90% of the company's shares were transferred to me through a family trust. All paperwork is notarized, filed, and compliant with corporate governance. Mr. Dalton scanned the document, his eyebrows rising. Is this accurate? He asked, voice measured. It is, I replied. My father trusted me to oversee his legacy, and he knew what this company could become without oversight. The room stilled, the weight of my words unmistakable. Martin's face flushed. This is absurd, he snapped, standing now. Why would your father? Because he saw what you couldn't, I interrupted, my tone firm but calm. He saw competence, not bravado. I opened the second folder, sliding a financial report across the table. Let's talk performance, I said. The numbers spoke louder than any shout. Employee satisfaction down 38%, turnover up 47%, $2 million in misused funds, unauthorized travel, executive bonuses, all signed by Martin. I've compiled testimony from department heads, employee surveys, and audits, I continued, my voice steady as board members flipped through pages. Misleading investor reports, ignored discrimination complaints, and a flattening revenue trajectory in a booming market, all under your leadership, Martin. He slammed a hand on the table, his charm unraveling. You're twisting data for a personal vendetta. I met his glare unshaken. I don't need to twist anything. You relied on no one powerful enough to question you. That ends today. The CFO whispered urgently to the general counsel, who began typing. Mr. Dalton looked disturbed, his faith in Martin visibly cracking. I pulled the final document. As the majority shareholder, I'm submitting a motion to remove Martin Rhee as CEO, effective immediately. My 90% ownership carries the vote. The board secretary blinked, stunned. You don't need a second? I own 90%, I said simply. Mr. Dalton cleared his throat. Per company bylaws, the motion stands. Martin's face twisted, rage, disbelief, defeat. He didn't resist, but his exit was a storm, the door slamming behind him. I exhaled, the room's energy shifting to me. He hadn't looked powerful leaving. He looked small, a shadow of the titan he'd played. I turned to the board, my voice steady. This company deserves better, so do its people. Starting today, that's what they'll get. Mr. Dalton nodded, a faint smile forming. Welcome back, Arya. The words carried weight, not just for me, but for the legacy I'd reclaimed. I gathered my documents, the skyline still watching, and felt my Otetz's hand on my shoulder, guiding me forward. Martin was gone, but my work was just beginning. The boardroom, once his stage, was now mine, not for conquest, but for restoration. The conference hall buzzed with cautious hope, a sea of faces, engineers, interns, custodians, watching me at the podium. It was Monday, a week after I'd turned Martin's world upside down, and the air felt different, like a room aired out after years of staleness. I'd called every employee to this all-hands meeting, not to flaunt my victory, but to rebuild what he'd broken. My father's company deserved its soul back, and I stood alone, no notes, no slides, just the truth I'd carried for 15 years. Their eyes held questions, doubts, and flickers of trust. I was ready to earn the rest. Some of you know me, I began, my voice clear, carrying to the back of the Chicago hall. Some only know what you've been told, but let me start with this. I didn't come to take power, I came to restore trust. Heads tilted, murmurs fading. Last week I was fired, I said, a faint smile breaking the tension. Told I wasn't what this company needed, that I lacked the leadership to shape its future. Nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. I didn't fight back then, because leadership isn't about volume or vanity. It's about vision, respect, and lifting the people who do the work. I stepped from the podium, closer to the front row, locking eyes with familiar faces, engineers I'd brainstormed with, assistants long overlooked. For years, this company ran on your ideas, your late nights, your belief in something bigger. Somewhere, that got lost. Starting today, we change that. The room was silent, but it was a listening silence, alive with possibility. I outlined my plan. Open feedback, promotions based on merit, and a culture where no one's voice was drowned out. Heads nodded, skepticism softening into hope. Over the next 2 weeks, I did something radical. I listened. I met with department heads in corner offices, team leads in cramped cubicles, and interns in the break room. I sat with receptionists and custodial staff, asking what wasn't working, what they needed, and who deserved more. Their answers painted a vivid picture: a company stifled by fear, where talent like Maya, a customer service star, languished while her manager took credit. I promoted Maya to head of client experience, a role she'd already mastered unofficially. Kevin, a brilliant product developer who'd quit under Martin's neglect, returned after a single call from me, his eyes bright with purpose. HR was my next target. I read every buried complaint: discrimination, favoritism, ignored pleas for fairness. Several mid-level managers, Martin's loyalists who'd fostered toxicity, were quietly let go. In their place, I launched the People First Initiative, a program my father had once sketched in a notebook I'd kept. It rewarded innovation, fostered collaboration, and broke glass ceilings. No more whisper networks, just open doors. I watched the company transform. Desks sprouted photos, plants, and personality. Laughter echoed in the break room, where once only hushed complaints lived. One evening, I walked the halls alone, the Chicago skyline a soft glow beyond the windows. Near the engineering bullpen, a whiteboard caught my eye. In blue marker, someone had scrawled, "She came back," underlined twice. I stood there, the words sinking in. Not she won, not she fired Martin, but she came back. It was more than a title, it was a promise kept. I moved into the CEO's office the next day, not for the bigger desk, but because it was time. The nameplate read, Aria Bennett, Chief Executive Officer, simple and sleek. I placed my father's photo in the corner, a snapshot from the company's opening, both of us smiling, hopeful. The office felt like a continuation, not a conquest. My father's portrait hung on the wall, not as a monument, but a reminder of why I was here. I sat down, opened my laptop, and began reviewing proposals from teams I'd empowered. The energy was softer now, brighter. People stayed late because they wanted to, not out of fear. Maya stopped, now leading with quiet confidence, dropped by with a report, her eyes sparkling. "The team's ideas are flowing," she said. I smiled, feeling my father's hand on my shoulder, guiding me still. This wasn't just a company, it was a home, and I'd brought it back to life. A year ago, I walked out of this Chicago tower with a cardboard box and a polite smile, dismissed as a cog in a machine I was destined to steer. Today, I stepped through the same glass doors, a tailored suit hugging my frame, a leather folder under my arm, and the company's future resting on my shoulders. The lobby hummed with life, employees nodding hello, their faces bright with purpose. The receptionist stood as I entered, her grin warm. "Morning, Ms. Bennett," she called. "Aria, please," I said, smiling back. "We're all on the same team." The elevator chimed softly, carrying me to the top floor, where I'd turned my father's dream into reality. The CEO's office was no longer Martin's domain but mine, though I'd kept its bones, the walnut desk, the broad windows framing Chicago's skyline. What changed were the walls, now lined with photos of our people, team retreats, product launches led by names once ignored, moments of joy captured in candid frames. Behind my chair hung my father's portrait, his steady gaze a quiet reminder of why I was here. I sat down, opened my laptop, and reviewed the quarterly report. The numbers sang: revenue up 23%, employee retention up 41%, customer satisfaction soaring, all achieved not through shortcuts but through ethics, collaboration, and transparency. My father would have been proud. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called. Maya, now head of client experience, stepped inside, her glasses glinting with the same spark I'd seen in her first report. "You ready?" she asked. "They're waiting in the conference room." I smoothed my blazer and stood. Let's do it. The boardroom felt transformed, not by decor but by presence. Half the board were women, several under 40, their questions sharp, their ideas bold. Richard Tanaka, our new strategic advisor, sat at the table's center, his calm intellect a nod to the kind of leader my father admired. Before we began, Richard gestured to me. "Aria has a few words." I hadn't planned to speak, but standing there, every eye on me, not with judgment, but respect, I felt the weight of my father's trust. "Thank you all," I said, my voice steady, warm, "for believing in change, for making hard decisions when easy ones were safer, for helping rebuild a company that puts people before power." I paused, letting the words settle. Someone once said I lacked leadership, but leadership isn't about volume or titles. It's about vision, accountability, and the courage to do what's right, even when it's hard. My father built this company on those values. I'm proud we're living up to them again. A quiet beat, then applause, soft, genuine, the kind that lingers in your bones. That afternoon, I took the long way back to my office, weaving through departments like I used to when I was just another face. I high-fived marketing interns buzzing over their first big campaign, laughed with developers debugging code, and paused to hear an engineer's pitch. In the break room, someone had baked cupcakes for an intern's last day. I grabbed one, sat among them, and talked about nothing important for 20 minutes. Movies, weekend plans, the Cubs' latest game. It felt like family, a place where people belonged, not just worked. Back in my office, I stood by the window, Lake Michigan stretching beyond the city's edge. The whiteboard message from months ago echoed in my mind. She came back, but now it was more. I hadn't just returned, I'd built something better. My father's photo sat on my desk, his smile mirroring mine from that opening day long ago. I didn't feel triumph or vengeance, just peace, a quiet certainty that I'd honored his legacy. This company wasn't mine to conquer, it was mine to nurture, to grow with the people who made it breathe. As the skyline glowed, I sat back down, ready for tomorrow, knowing I was exactly where I was meant to be.
They called me the family failure, but while they laughed, I built a billion-dollar empire in silence. Now they're about to find out who I really am. The crystal chandeliers of the Gilded Oak cast soft, elegant shadows across white linen tablecloths, the kind that whispered wealth and exclusivity in the quietest of tones. Polished silverware gleamed. Glasses sparkled like they knew secrets. I adjusted the sleeves of my plain black blazer. It was off the rack, slightly worn, but chosen with precision. Let them believe I couldn't afford better. That illusion had served me well. At the center of the room, my sister Abigail glowed like royalty. Her Chanel suit hugged her figure just right, every strand of her chestnut hair curled into effortless perfection. She laughed easily, confidently, her manicured fingers brushing the arm of a powerful-looking man in tailored navy. That was Abigail Hart, my older sister, the golden girl, a self-made woman, if you ignored the part where she'd stepped onto our father's shoulders to get there. She sat surrounded by her elite clients looking like a CEO, acting like a queen, and always talking about me. From a distance, I could hear her laugh. That performative, silvery giggle. "Oh, my poor sister Sienna," she was probably saying, still living off her savings. Couldn't handle the pressure in finance. But they didn't know those savings were worth $4.2 billion as of this morning's market open. And Sienna, darling? Abigail's voice rang out as I approached the table. It carried that cruel mixture of forced affection and thinly veiled mockery. "So glad you could join us." She smiled like I was a charity case she'd invited out of pity. Her gaze flicked to my blazer with theatrical disapproval. "You really should have said it was at the Gilded Oak. You could have borrowed something more appropriate." I took my seat, the one furthest from her VIPs, of course. I glanced around. This wasn't the first time I'd dined at the Gilded Oak. Just the first time I'd let my family see me here. "The blazer's comfortable," I said casually, folding my napkin across my lap. Abigail blinked, baffled by the concept of comfort over brand names. "This is William Carter," she said next, gesturing toward the salt and pepper man beside her. "He's considering moving his tech portfolio to our firm." She stressed the word, our staking her claim to power. "William, this is my sister Sienna. She used to work in finance too before." She trailed off dramatically before I decided the corporate hamster wheel wasn't for me. I finished smoothly accepting the wine list from the hovering sommelier. Abigail's lips thinned. She'd hoped I'd let her finish that story about my burnout, the breakdown she'd invented, and whispered to every socialite she knew. And William smiled politely. Abigail said, "You were between opportunities. That must be difficult in this market. I looked up at the sommelier. The Chateau Lafite Rothschild, 1982, please. The entire table went quiet. Abigail's head snapped toward me, eyes narrowing in alarm. That's over $8,000 a bottle, she hissed. You can't afford that. I'll put it on my usual account, I said, not looking at her. Michael, correct? Of course, Miss Hart. The sommelier said with a slight bow. Your regular table is also available if you'd prefer it? No, thank you. I'll sit here tonight. Abigail stared at me like I'd just spoken in tongues. Michael, Miss Hart, regular table. She didn't know. She dined here for years but never once noticed my name in the reservation books under a private account. Because why would she? Sienna. She leaned in her voice a sharp whisper. Seriously, this is humiliating. Just let me pay. Actually, William interrupted, peering at me with renewed interest. Did you say Hart Sienna Hart? Abigail's laugh was tight. Yes, that's her name, but she's not. Apex Ventures, William cut in. His voice tinged with astonishment. The table went still. Forks paused. Glasses froze midair. William turned fully toward me now. The same Sienna Hart who just acquired Tech Trend Solutions. I offered a small smile. Their quote was undervalued. Their AI division alone was worth more than twice the market cap. That was a $3 billion acquisition, William said slowly. In cash, Abigail looked like she'd been slapped. Her flawless complexion turned bone white. There must be some mistake, she stammered. She works from her apartment, but she doesn't even. She runs one of the most successful private equity firms in the country. William said, eyes never leaving me. I can't believe I didn't recognize you sooner. Your dismantling of Sterling Enterprises last year was masterful. I raised my glass, remembering how Abigail had called me unemployed during that deal while I secretly tore her client's empire apart. You're not, she started. Between opportunities, I offered with a polite shrug. No, I'm exactly where I planned to be. The rest of dinner unfolded like a live-wire opera. Every lie Abigail had spun unraveled at the seams. Every half-truth she'd told about me publicly detonated in front of her clients. I turned to William again. By the way, I've been analyzing Carter Technologies. Your quantum computing patents are fascinating. We're not for sale, he said automatically. Everything's for sale, I replied. At the right price. Michael returned with the wine. I took a sip, savoring it. Oh, and Abigail, don't worry about the bill. I own this restaurant. Bought it last year. Her eyes darted between the staff, the clients, and me. Her voice cracked. Why didn't you tell me you never asked? That night, as I left the Gilded Oak and stepped into my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Abigail just called in tears. What did you do? I typed back. Nothing much. Just showed her that sometimes the best success stories are written in silence. The next morning, the chaos began before sunrise. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Texts, missed calls, emails. Family members who hadn't spoken to me in years were suddenly scrambling to reconnect. In reality, I was seated in my real office, the top floor of the Apex Ventures building downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city's skyline. I'd spent 5 years quietly conquering. Your sister's been in the lobby for an hour, said Emma, my assistant. She's tried 3 different names to get past security. I glanced at the security feed. Abigail looked cracked. Wrinkled suit, smudged mascara desperation leaking from every pore. Your mother's called 6 times, Emma added. Your cousin Emily has already updated her LinkedIn to say she's closely related to Apex Ventures CEO. I laughed once bitterly. Then Emma said something unexpected. Your brother James is here with your father. Send them up. They entered the office like tourists walking into a cathedral. Dad's eyes swept over the award-lined walls, the modern artwork, the framed Forbes cover with my face on it. Quite an office, he said. Finally better than the sad little apartment you said I should be embarrassed to work from. I replied calmly. Sienna James started. We need to talk about Abigail. Of course not about me. Not to apologize. This wasn't an olive branch. It was damage control. She's ruined. James continued. The Lincoln Building was her biggest portfolio. Without it, she'll have to actually earn her success. I said flatly, "You could have warned us." Dad burst out, letting us think. "Exactly what you wanted to think," I interrupted. "When did any of you ask about my work? About my goals? My choices?" They didn't respond. I turned to the window where the Lincoln Building stood tall. You all believed I'd had a breakdown, but I saw something no one else saw. Tech companies bleeding value, begging to be rebuilt. Dad looked pale. I used my trust fund as seed money, lived modestly, worked in silence. And now I handed him a folder. Hart consulting his company Mine Now. What he choked out. As of this morning, I said I own 51%. Apex Enterprises was my holding company. You never thought to look behind the buyer. James flipped through the document speechless. "I'm calling a board meeting," I said. "Tomorrow to announce the transition. I expect you'll prepare your retirement statement." "You can't do this." Dad gasped. "I already have. 8:55 a.m., Hart Consulting Executive Boardroom, dark mahogany walls, brass-handled doors, and a row of 10 leather chairs. The same intimidating decor my father once called the arena. When I was 12, he'd let me sit in a corner while he eviscerated underperforming VPs. Today, I sat at the head of the table in his chair legs crossed calm as the sea before a storm. One by one, directors filed in, clutching the glossy press packet my team had couriered before dawn. Their expressions ran a gradient from confusion to naked fear. At 8:57, the double doors burst open. Richard Hart, my father, strode in with Abigail half a step behind. They wore matching Navy power suits, but neither had slept. Richard's tie was knotted too tight. Abigail's mascara had the faint shimmer of tears long ago wiped away. Dad planted his palms on the table. "This meeting is irregular and unauthorized." I gave him the faintest smile. "Read your bylaws, Dad. Any 51% owner can call an emergency session. You helped draft that clause." A hum rippled down the table. Everyone understood what that meant. Control the paper trail. I nodded to Sophia Lynn, Apex Ventures' chief counsel. She glided around the room, passing stapled bundles, notarized stock transfer forms, voting agreements, proxy letters, 20 months of stealth purchases laid bare. Abigail grabbed her copy, flipping pages with jittery fingers. "These are fake," she insisted, voice cracking. "Like my breakdown was fake?" I asked, unblinking. "Or my alleged bankruptcy?" Her knuckles whitened around the packet. Dad pointed a trembling finger. "You've been plotting against your own family." "Planning," I corrected. "Plotting is what you called it when I was 9 and suggested moving our philanthropy fund into tech ETFs. Turns out I was right back then, too." A chuckle escaped one of the outside directors. Mr. Ellis, the audit committee chair, quickly stifled when Dad shot him a death glare. "Enter the clients." Before Richard could launch his next objection, the doors opened again. William Carter walked in, trailed by 3 people wearing visitor badges. The CEOs of Sterling Enterprises Tech Trend Solutions and Nebula Robotics firms my father's company had once courted and lost. Abigail's face drained of color. Those were her white whale accounts. William took the seat at my right. "Morning, Sienna. The patent portfolio figures you sent are even stronger than I expected." I inclined my head, glad to hear it. "We'll finalize after this vote." He folded his hands. "Full disclosure to the board. Carter Technologies intends to move its entire asset management mandate, $19 billion under Apex Ventures, on the condition that Miss Hart assumes effective control. $19 billion. A hush so deep I could hear the clock tick. The numbers that kill. I clicked the remote. The wall screen sprang to life with bar charts. No fancy colors, just brutal grayscale. Client churn up 40%. R&D spend flat for 7 consecutive quarters. Revenue per advisor down 23% year over year. These slides use your own data. I told the board. Richard's strategy has been harvest, not grow, milking legacy clients while ignoring market shifts. That model ends today. Mr. Klein, the operations director, cleared his throat. "Richard, I've raised these issues for a year. You tabled every motion. Dad glared. Klein stared back unexpectedly emboldened. Phase 1. I continued spins the underperforming insurance division into a separate entity, merges our fintech incubator with TechTrend's AI lab, and creates a dedicated quantum group around Carter Technologies patents. Target EBITDA lift 17% in 18 months. I advanced to the next slide. Projected share price stair-stepping upward in stark black ink. Chairs shuffled, pens tapped. The board could smell profit. The vote. Sophia placed a silver digital tablet before each director. Touch yes or no to ratify the new leadership structure. Anonymous but instant. Dad pounded the table. You are voting on the destruction of a legacy. Correction, I said. They're voting on its future. 15 seconds of nerve-shredding silence. Tablets pinged. Result 8. Yes, 2 no. Control transferred. Just like that. Richard Hart's shoulders sagged. The fight bleeding out of him as reality took hold. Almost on cue, the doors opened a third time. Margaret Hart, my mother, rushed in, heels clacking, and Patricia right behind, clutching her pearls like a lifeline. Sienna, stop this. Mom pleaded. We are a family. Were we family? I asked softly. When you let Abigail rumor mill my mental health because it made a good dinner joke. Were we family when you uninvited me from Dad's 60th because my sad career embarrassed the guests? Mom faltered. Tears welled. But for once I didn't soften. I'd earned this armor. Abigail pushed past her. You think money makes you powerful? No, I said, competence makes me powerful. Money just pays the electricity bill. Security appeared. Richard looked at me, equal parts fury and something like awe. I built this company from nothing. And then you stopped building, I said. That's why you're leaving with a full pension instead of a pink slip. Take the graceful exit, Dad. He opened his mouth, closed it again. The Titan deflated. As the ousted trio were escorted down the hall, I turned to the remaining directors. Gentlemen, ladies, meet your new strategic partners. William and the other CEOs distributed thick binders titled Integration Roadmap. We spent the next 3 hours in real-work operational synergy governance. Reform ESG commitments, global tax structures. By noon, we'd scheduled a joint press conference and greenlit a $150 million innovation fund. City lights glittered like scattered diamonds beneath the floor-to-ceiling glass. I removed the plain black blazer and hung it on a mahogany stand. Beneath it, a precisely tailored cream silk blouse. Quiet luxury no one had noticed under the cheap jacket. Symbolic. Emma stepped in, tablet in hand. Press reaction is 95% positive. Clients are flooding onboarding. One more thing, James sent flowers with a card. Always believed in you. Sorry I stayed silent. I smiled, surprisingly moved. Send him an access badge for Monday. Let's find out what my little brother can really do. And your mother, Emma, asked gently. She's called 9 times. Hold the calls through the weekend. I stared out at the skyline. We'll have boundaries now. She nodded and left. Silence returned. My oldest ally. I opened the family group chat. 53 unread messages of panic apologies, recriminations. I typed. Next Sunday dinner will be in Apex Ventures boardroom. Dress appropriately. We have a new hierarchy to discuss. Send. They once said I was the family failure, the sister who cracked under pressure. The daughter who wasted her education. But while they were busy crafting a bedtime story about my downfall, I wrote a business plan in the dark and executed it with surgical precision. Revenge, perhaps, but mostly proof. Proof that the smallest voice in the room can learn to roar, and that the world's sharpest blade is the one no one sees until it's already at their throat. I poured the last inch of Chateau Lafite into a crystal tumbler, raised it to the window, and watched the city I now commanded. They underestimated me. They won't do it again. Sienna Hart's journey in the story reveals a profound lesson about the power of resilience, strategic silence, and self-belief in the face of underestimation. Mocked as the family failure, Sienna endured her sister Abigail's public ridicule and her family's dismissive assumptions, who painted her as a burnout unable to handle the pressures of finance. Instead of succumbing to their narrative, she quietly built a billion-dollar empire, leveraging her intellect and foresight to seize opportunities others overlooked. Her lesson is clear. True strength lies not in loud proclamations or seeking external validation, but in disciplined, purposeful action executed with precision. By maintaining a low profile, wearing an unassuming blazer, living modestly, and keeping her successes private, she turned her family's misjudgments into a strategic advantage, striking when the moment was right. Sienna's triumph at the Gilded Oak and Apex Ventures boardroom underscores that competence, not wealth or status, defines power. Her acquisition of her father's company and the dismantling of Abigail's fabricated narrative were not just acts of revenge, but proof that underestimated voices can reshape legacies. The story teaches that enduring doubt, even from those closest, can fuel a relentless drive to succeed, provided one trusts their vision and works tirelessly in the shadows. Sienna's choice to set boundaries with her family and focus on building a future rather than dwelling on past slights emphasizes the importance of self-determination. Her rise from a supposed failure to a commanding leader illustrates that the sharpest victories are often silent, calculated, and delivered with undeniable proof of one's worth, ensuring that those who once doubted will never do so again.